Welcome back to the Books Bible Study. We are continuing with the book of Leviticus, the third book of the Bible. We are on Leviticus chapter 13. Verse 1 says, "And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying," verse 2, "When a man has on the skin of his body a swelling, a scab, or a bright spot, and it becomes on the skin of his body like a leprous sore, then he shall be brought to Aaron the priest or to one of his sons, the priest." So last chapter we learned what a woman should do when she gives birth, what offering she should give, when she should give it, when she is pronounced unclean and clean, right? So now we're getting into the ways that the Hebrews cleanse themselves for what God calls physical uncleanness or an affliction. So it was the priest, not the physician, that discerned this particular disease and gave the remedy for it. Okay, so verse 3 says, "The priest shall examine the sore on the skin of the body, and if the hair on the sore has turned white, and the sore appears to be deeper than the skin of his body, it is a leprous sore. Then the priest shall examine him and pronounce him unclean." Verse 4. "But if the bright spot is white on the skin of his body and does not appear to be deeper than the skin, then his hair has not turned white, then the priest shall isolate the one who has the sore 7 days." Verse 5. "And the priest shall examine him on the seventh day, and indeed if the sore appears to be as it was, and the sore has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall isolate him another 7 days." Verse 6. "Then the priest shall examine him again on the seventh day, and indeed if the sore has faded and the sore has not spread on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is only a scab, and he shall wash his clothes and be clean." Verse 7. "But if the scab should at all spread over the skin, after he has been seen by the priest for his cleansing, he shall be seen by the priest again." Verse 8. "And if the priest sees that the scab has indeed spread on the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is leprosy." So we see this particular disease in the Bible a lot, right? Leprosy, or what they translated the word to be, is an infectious disease that affects the skin, the nerves, and the eyes. So it causes numbness, muscle weakness, patches on the skin, and sometimes deformities, in really bad cases, right? Right now, today, it is curable, but back then it was considered a plague because it sometimes represented divine judgment, right? So you will see this particular disease a lot in the Bible. Verse 9. "When the leprous sore is on a person, then he shall be brought to the priest." Verse 10. "And the priest shall examine him, and indeed, if the swelling on the skin is white, and it has turned the hair white, and there is a spot of raw flesh in the swelling." Verse 11. "It is an old leprosy on the skin of his body. The priest shall pronounce him unclean, and shall not isolate him, for he is unclean." Verse 12. "And if leprosy breaks out all over the skin, and the leprosy covers all the skin of the one who has a sore, from his head to his foot, wherever the priest looks," verse 13, "then the priest shall consider, and indeed if the leprosy has covered all his body, he shall pronounce him clean who has the sore. It has all turned white, he is clean." Verse 14. "But when raw flesh appears on him, he shall be unclean." Verse 15. "And the priest shall examine the raw flesh and pronounce him to be unclean, for the raw flesh is unclean. It is leprosy." Verse 16. "Or if the raw flesh changes and turns white again, he shall come to the priest." Verse 17. "And the priest shall examine him, and indeed if the sore has turned white, then the priest shall pronounce him clean who has a sore. He is clean." So as long as it was white and not raw and fleshy, they were pronounced clean. Verse 18. "If the body develops a boil in the skin and it is healed," verse 19, "and in the place of the boil there comes a white swelling or a bright spot, reddish white, then it shall be shown to the priest." Verse 20. "And if, when the priest sees it, it indeed appears deeper than the skin, and its hair has turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous sore which has broken out of the boil." Verse 21. "But if the priest examines it, and indeed there is no white hairs in it, and it is not deeper than the skin, but has faded, then the priest shall isolate him 7 days." Verse 22. "And if it should at all spread over the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous sore." So I believe that leprosy pertains to more than this specific disease. It pertains to things that are contagious that can spread over the skin. Um, yeah, I think the translation, yeah. Verse 23. But if the bright spot stays in one place and has not spread, it is the scar of the boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. Verse 24. Or if the body receives a burn on its skin by fire, and the raw flesh of the burn becomes a bright spot, reddish, white, or white, verse 25, then the priest shall examine it, and indeed, if the hair of the bright spot has turned white, and it appears deeper than the skin, it is leprosy broken out of the burn. Therefore, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous sore. So, yeah, this is not talking about a disease. It's talking about different types of skin afflictions, right? Because it said if the body receives a burn by fire, so that's not disease related, right? Verse 26 says, but if the priest examines it, and indeed there are no white hairs in the bright spot, and it is not deeper than the skin but has faded, then the priest shall isolate him 7 days. Verse 27. So it's basically saying if a burn gets infected or not. That's what it seems like. Verse 27 says, and the priest shall examine him on the 7th day. If it has at all spread over the skin, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprous sore. Verse 28, but if the bright spot stays in one place and has not spread on the skin but has faded, it is a swelling from the burn. The priest shall pronounce him clean, for it is a scar from the burn. Verse 29, if a man or woman has a sore on the head or the beard, verse 30, then the priest shall examine the sore, and indeed, if it appears deeper than the skin, and there is in it thin yellow hair, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a scaly leprosy of the head or the beard. Verse 31. But if the priest examines the scaly sore, and indeed it does not appear deeper than the skin, and there's no black hair in it, then the priest shall isolate the one who has the scale 7 days. So yeah, this seems like any affliction affecting the skin. I'm thinking this may be psoriasis here. Verse 32 says, and on the 7th day the priest shall examine the sore, and indeed if the scale has not spread, and there's no yellow hair in it, and the scale does not appear deeper than the skin, verse 33, he shall shave himself, but the scale he shall not shave. And the priest shall isolate the one who has the scale another 7 days, verse 34. On the 7th day, the priest shall examine the scale, so they're coming back every 7 days to see and monitor what's happening with the scale. On the 7th day, the priest shall examine the scale, and indeed, if the scale has not spread over the skin and does not appear deeper than the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. He shall wash his clothes and be clean. Verse 35. But if the scale should at all spread over the skin after his cleansing, verse 36, then the priest shall examine him. And indeed, if the scale has spread over the skin, the priest need not seek for yellow hair. He is unclean. So if it's spreading, it's contagious, you're unclean, right? Verse 37, but if the scale appears to be at a standstill, and there is black hair grown up in it, the scale has healed. He is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. Verse 38, if a man or woman has bright spots on the skin of the body, specifically white bright spots, verse 39, then the priest shall look, and indeed, if the bright spots on the skin of the body are dull white, it is a white spot that grows on the skin. He is clean. Verse 40, as for the man whose hair has fallen from his head, he is bald, but he is clean. Verse 41, he whose hair has fallen from his forehead, he is bald on the forehead, but he is clean. Verse 42, and if there is on the bald head or bald forehead a reddish white sore, it is leprosy breaking out on his bald head or his bald forehead. Verse 43, then the priest shall examine it, and indeed if the swelling of the sore is reddish white on his bald head or on his bald forehead, as the appearance of leprosy on the skin of the body, verse 44, he is a leprous man. He is unclean. The priest shall surely pronounce him unclean. His sore is on his head. Verse 45, now the leper is a leprous person. So if you hear about this in the New Testament when Jesus healed the lepers, right? So it says, now the leper on whom the sore is, his clothes shall be torn and his head bare, and he shall uncover his mustache and cry, unclean, unclean. right? So because this was a contagious disease, they had to constantly yell out unclean, unclean, so that others would know and not come near him. So you can imagine someone, um, your walk could be walking by or something, or going to get water or anything like that, which they were told they had to go outside the camp. But if you could just imagine someone yelling unclean, unclean, they had to announce, right? The priest had to pronounce it. The person who had it had to pronounce unclean, unclean, right? Verse 46 says, he shall be unclean. All the days he has the sore, he shall be unclean. He is unclean, and he shall dwell alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. Verse 47. Also, if a garment has a leprous plague in it, whether it is a woolen garment or a linen garment, verse 38, whether it is in the warp or woof of linen or wool, whether in leather or in anything made of leather, verse 49, and if the plague is greenish or reddish in the garment or in the leather, whether in the warp or in the woof or in anything made of leather, it is a leprous plague and shall be shown to the priest. So, leprosy itself is caused by a bacteria that affected skin, but they also considered things like mold and mildew a form of leprosy, right? Because of its ability to spread and contaminate. So anything it appears that could contaminate the skin, infection, anything like that, that can contaminate something, they considered it to be leprous, right? So this chapter is given the process of checking and or removing contaminated, contagious people or objects, right? Verse 50. The priest shall examine the plague and isolate that which has the plague 7 days. 51. And he shall examine the plague on the seventh day. If the plague has spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, in the leather or in anything made of leather, the plague is an active leprosy, it is unclean. Verse 52. He shall therefore burn that garment in which is the plague, whether warp or woof, in wool or in linen, or anything of leather, for it is an active leprosy, the garment shall be burned in the fire. Verse 53. But if the priest examines it, and indeed the plague has not spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, or in anything made of leather, verse 54, then the priest shall command that they wash the thing in which is the plague, and he shall isolate it another 7 days. So they would wait 7 days for everything. Verse 55. Then the priest shall examine the plague after it has been washed, and indeed, if the plague has not changed its color, though the plague has not spread, it is unclean, and you shall burn it in the fire. It continues eating away, whether the damage is outside or inside. Verse 56. If the priest examines it, and indeed the plague has faded after washing it, then he shall tear it out of the garment, whether out of the warp, or out of the woof, or out of the leather. Verse 57. But if it appears again in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, or in anything made of leather, it is a spreading plague. You shall burn with fire that in which is the plague. Verse 58. And if you wash the garment, either warp or woof, or whatever is made of leather, if the plague has disappeared from it, then it shall be washed a second time, and it shall be clean. Verse 59. This is the law of the leprous plague in a garment of wool or linen, either in the warp or woof, or in anything made of leather, to pronounce it clean, or to pronounce it unclean. So, these are the laws or the commandments listed in Leviticus chapter 13. The priest must examine and rule out the signs of leprosy, right? Also known as zararat. So they have to examine and rule that out in a person. And I believe, like I said, that it pertains to more than a disease, like a skin disease, but also other contagious skin disorders, because they also called things like that grows on clothes and objects a leprous plague. So in Hebrew, the word zaraat means an afflicting condition or plague that can affect skin, clothes, and objects, right? The second commandment was to follow the laws governing leprosy on garments. The third one was a person afflicted with leprosy must publicly display signs of mourning and separation. So that means letting their hair grow out, tearing their clothes, warning others. They had to constantly yell out to people that they were unclean. And the fourth one was a leprous person must not shave the hair around the affected area. Right. So there are four commandments in this chapter concerning this type of affliction, which we learn that is any disease or something that can become infected, whether it is on the body or something like mold or mildew that can spread and be contagious with clothes. And we'll also see the rules for when it's in the dwelling in the home, right? So that concludes Leviticus chapter 13. Stay with us for Leviticus chapter 14. God bless.